I'm going to tell you a story. You know, the Thankful Thursdays program, which came out of the Thanksgiving program that we ran, really started when I moved to New Jersey 22 years ago. I moved to the area, we opened a Chabad, and I was looking to find an impact, find a way to make a difference in the community. And I started visiting some of the local assisted livings and nursing homes where there were Jewish residents, not that many, and we started doing some holiday programs. Once a week I'd stop by and visit with them, and I realized that there's a population in these facilities that are isolated, and isolation is not easy. There were several individuals over the years. There are a lot of people that I've met, a lot of people that I got to know, but there are certain individuals that make a mark and that I remember several decades later. And one such individual in a nursing home was a gentleman in assisted living, was a gentleman named Bert. Now, Bert was a quiet man who was an amputee. He only had one leg, he was in a wheelchair, but he was always upbeat and always positive. And I'd go to his room and I'd visit and we'd pray, we'd put on tefillin, and he was filled with just a sense of optimism and a sense of hope. And he was just a great guy. He had pictures on the wall of his children, of his grandchildren. He would tell me about them. And he was incredibly, incredibly proud. When I think of fortitude, when I think of strength, when I think of courage, all these years later, I think of Bert. Bert Platkin, whose grandson is New Jersey's Attorney General, Matt Platkin. Matt's someone that lives by those virtues of my friend Bert, of courage, of strength, of optimism, of hope for our state, for our legal system, and for our country. Without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce New Jersey's Attorney General, Matthew Platkin.
Whew. Sorry, that caught me a little by surprise. Obviously I knew the story. Thank you, Rabbi. I have to say, it's really touching to hear that. My son's named after him, and my grandpa was not somebody who got to speak in rooms like this. So, excuse me, just to hear those words it means a lot. It's really great to be here. You know, I joked with Rabbi Lubin when I came in. He said this is a small, intimate affair. I'd love to see what a big affair looks like. And I said to him, I said, you really know how to time your events, doing it in the week between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Shana Tova, everyone, wishing you all a very happy new year. And he said, it's good because everybody's going to be here and not on vacation. So I hadn't thought about that. That's pretty strategic. This is I'm going to be brief because I know you're here really to hear this distinguished panel, and of course to hear from my dear friend Justice Weiner after, who's going to give amazing remarks as she always does. But this is a really special week, and I think it's important that we come together because this is a week, of course, in the Jewish religion that we all stand equally before God, that every one of us goes before and asks for forgiveness. By the way, I was born on Yom Kippur, so my mom jokes that I was born repenting. So this is a very important week for me. But it's a week that we stand equally. And it's also a week that I think we reaffirm our own belief in what's possible, in what the next year can be. It's, I think, a very solemn way to start a new year. And I have to just briefly, I didn't plan to read this, but as I was at services this past weekend, there was a passage in our Machzor that I took a picture of. I'm not sure if I'm supposed to do that, so if I'm not, I'll apologize for it on Monday. But it's short, and I just want to read it because it frames, I think, what's going to be discussed tonight. It goes like this. It says, "The time may be distant and the outcome uncertain, for how could suffering endemic to the human condition ever come to an end? Cessation of desire, relinquishing attachment, diminished expectations, all of these might ease the pain of being alive. Or decide instead that you'll continue to dream, hope, remain fiercely attached to the bringing of a better day, even if the outcome's uncertain, and even if the time is very distant." So I share that because I think in so many ways that's what the law is. It's a hope that things can get better for people. It's a promise of people's rights and what they're entitled to. And of course, it's not perfect. Of course, it's a never-ending quest to make that law, these laws, the laws that govern what we do and how we live, better. But it just struck me as such a fitting time to be coming together to have this conversation, and you could not have a better person to be your featured speaker than Justice Rachel Weiner Apter to help frame that discussion, along with this distinguished panel to my right. I have to tell briefly, very briefly, how I first met Justice Weiner Apter. I was working on Governor Murphy's first campaign, and somebody calls me, and you get a lot of calls when you're working on a campaign like that, and somebody calls me and says, I have the perfect person, you need to meet her, she is brilliant, I think she was on the Supreme Court or worked with the Supreme Court, and you get a lot of calls, and so I'm like, okay, send me your resume, let's see, because I wasn't really sure what was going on. He says, we went to camp together. I said, okay, send me your resume. And I get a resume, and you start realizing, oh, he wasn't kidding. I mean, clerking for a few judges that nobody's ever heard of, like Judge Rakoff, Judge Katzman, of course, Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. I called him back, and I said, okay, this person seems really impressive. What does she want to do? He said she wants to volunteer. She just wants to help think about the policies that you're working on. And so the first thing that struck me about Justice Weiner Apter was just the utter lack of ego and the sheer commitment to doing what's right and doing what I think I just discussed. As the late, and it saddens me to say late, Lieutenant Governor Sheila Oliver said of Justice Weiner Apter, she has been a champion for all New Jerseyans. Her record speaks for itself. One of my advisors in law school, Pam Carlin, once told me never say in an intro that their record speaks for themselves because you're just gonna then go say their record anyway, so don't say it. But if Sheila Oliver says her record speaks for itself, I think it does. When we joined the Murphy administration together in 2018, throughout her years as counsel to the Attorney General and then as director of the Division on Civil Rights, I got to witness firsthand Justice Weiner Apter's brilliance, as well as, importantly, her commitment to that bedrock principle of equal protection under the law. And I think this it started for Justice Weiner Apter from her personal experience. Growing up here in New Jersey, not far from where we are now, as an observant Jew in a pluralistic society, you come to understand the importance of inclusion and of equal treatment. She attended Morris Hills High School, again, not far from where we are now, went on to graduate summa cum laude from the University of Pennsylvania, and she earned her Juris Doctorate from a law school up north, Harvard Law School, graduating magna cum laude. I mentioned her clerkships, and I mentioned Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Two of her core beliefs, or core values, a central belief in the equality and dignity of all people, and the importance that, recognizing the impact that the law has on the lives of individual people, have remained at the forefront of Justice Weiner Apter's career, and I believe her judicial philosophy. She went on after law school to work in the Supreme Court, as I said, as well as in the appellate practice at Orrick, and then as an attorney at the ACLU. In 2018, she joined Attorney General Kabir Grewal's team, serving as his top advisor on civil rights and immigration issues, and then as the director, as I said, on the Division on Civil Rights, a role she held until 2021 when Governor Murphy announced her nomination. In that time, she did a number of things. She led New Jersey's efforts to preserve DACA, representing us in Texas, representing the state of New Jersey, but really the people of the United States, as well as helping draft Attorney General Grewal's Immigrant Trust Directive to ensure that victims and witnesses can report crimes without fear of deportation. She worked abroad in the state's law against discrimination. She successfully demanded that Facebook address an anti-Semitic webpage that encouraged violence against the Orthodox Jewish community in Ocean County. and she worked to prevent sexual harassment, combat bias, and stop anti-Black racism, and defended voting rights and the rights of same-sex couples. And that legacy has continued since Rachel was sworn in as a New Jersey Supreme Court Justice in October of 2022. I should say, if anybody thinks otherwise, we do not get any favorable treatment from Justice Weiner after. There is no tougher questioner that you will ever come before, and I'm so proud of the work, to see the work that she's doing there. Again, holding up the bedrock principle of equal justice under the law. New Jersey is so fortunate to have someone like Justice Weiner after on our Supreme Court. I also want to recognize her wonderful family who's here, and her children. But we're so fortunate to have her on the court, and most importantly tonight, we're fortunate to have her here as your featured presenter. I turn the mic over to Justice Rachel Weiner after.
Thank you so much, Attorney General Platkin, for that extraordinarily kind introduction. As the Attorney General just mentioned, a close friend introduced me to Matt in March of 2017 when he was serving as the policy director on Governor Murphy's first campaign. I was looking at the time to leave Orrick and return to the work that I had gone to law school to pursue, civil rights law. If you had asked me then if I could possibly be standing here 6.5 years later, I would have laughed and then said no. But I'm endlessly grateful for where I currently find myself, and Matt played an outsized role in that. Thank you. I'm honored to be among so many friends, colleagues, and family members tonight. Special thanks to Chief Justice Rabner, Justices Patterson and Noriega, my law clerks, Nick and Noemi, and my assistant, Tanya, my husband, John, my daughter, Eliana, my mother, Susie, and my father-in-law, Naftali. I was thrilled to be asked to participate in this event with Judge Koblitz, Rabbi Teleshkin, and Mr. Olinder. Judge Koblitz, I have long admired your career. In your 27 years on the bench, your opinions were known for their clarity and brevity. You may not have known it at the time, but you were hewing to Justice Ginsburg's motto, get it right and keep it tight. Rabbi Teleshkin, I have long admired you as well. In addition to your work on behalf of Soviet Jewry and with Klal, your book, Jewish Literacy, is like its own Jewish encyclopedia. It was by far the most useful book I received at my bat mitzvah, and it has moved with me to each of my homes since. Kurt, I'm sorry that we have not met before, but I very much look forward to hearing all of your insights on tonight's panel. When Justice Albin, on behalf of Rabbi Lubin, originally approached me many months ago about speaking at this event, I really wanted to say no. I had only recently joined the court, and I knew that I would not yet have completed my first full term. As you all know, and as the Attorney General mentioned, today's a few days after Rosh Hashanah, a few days before Yom Kippur, and then comes Sukkot and Simchat Torah, so we are right in the middle of the Jewish holidays. My kids just started back at school. I'm actually missing 2 back-to-school nights right now. In short, I knew this would be a frenetic time. But then I met Rabbi Lubin. I thought Justice Albin was incredibly persuasive, but he has nothing on Rabbi Lubin. In addition to creating and growing this wonderful symposium, Rabbi Lubin serves as a rabbi and inspiration to so many in the legal community, including to me. And when he told me the topic, I knew I could not decline. You see, Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat was by far my favorite show throughout much of my life. I saw it on Broadway as a preteen and fell in love, listening to the soundtrack over and over until I knew every word to every song. When I re-listened several weeks ago to prepare my remarks, I was surprised to realize that I still remember most of them. I learned that azure, ochre, and mauve were colors from this show. I once, in the year before Google Maps and Waze, even waylaid the burial procession of my best friend's grandfather because her then boyfriend and I were driving from the funeral to the cemetery together. We got a little too focused on the lyrics of Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat, and not quite focused enough on when the car in front of us was exiting off the highway. Don't worry, it all worked out, and that friend and her father are both here tonight. Joseph, both the Broadway show and the actual story from the Torah, are rich with material. Favoritism, dreams, jealousy, revenge, kidnapping, evil, trickery, seduction, crime and punishment, power, authoritarianism, famine, deception, supplication, and redemption. But Rabbi Lubin said I only have 20 minutes, so I want to focus on 4 lessons from Joseph, both the Andrew Lloyd Webber version and the Bible version, that are important for judging, lawyering, and life. Humility, courage, mutual responsibility, and forgiveness. First, 2 lessons for judging, humility and courage. At the beginning of the story, Joseph is the paradigm of what can come from the absence of humility, from arrogance, superiority, and haughtiness. For anyone who needs a quick refresher, in case you haven't been reading Genesis or listening to the soundtrack as much as I have recently, Joseph's mother, Rachel, was Jacob's favorite wife, leading Jacob to favor Joseph. As Jacob puts it, Joseph's mother, she was quite my favorite wife. I never really loved another all my life, and Joseph was my joy because he reminded me of her. But instead of simply loving Joseph in his heart, Jacob wanted to show the world he loved his son, to make it clear that Joseph was the special one. So Jacob bought his son a coat, a multicolored coat to wear. Upon receiving this new Technicolor dream coat, Joseph did not simply say thank you and politely hang the new coat in his closet. Instead, he preened in front of his brothers. It went something like this. I look handsome, I look smart, I am a walking work of art. And then this is when I learned that ochre is a color. Joseph's 11 brothers were not pleased, but if it were only Joseph's coat, the story probably would have ended there. It did not. Joseph's coat annoyed his brothers, but what makes us mad are the things that Joseph tells us of, the dreams he's often had. These were no ordinary dreams. And instead, I dreamed that in the fields one day the corn gave me a sign. Your 11 sheaves of corn all turned and bowed to mine. And then again, I dreamed I saw 11 stars, the sun, the moon, and sky. Bowing down before my star, it made me wonder why. Could it be that I was born for higher things than you, a post in someone's government, a ministry or 2? Joseph's brothers were livid. As they put it, not only is he tactless, but he's also rather dim, for there's 11 of us and there's only one of him. And now I promise my singing is over. They decided to throw Joseph. They decided to throw Joseph in a pit and leave him to die, and then tell their father Jacob that his favorite son was killed by a wild beast, or in the Broadway version, a goat. So what is the lesson for judging from this whole episode? As I discussed at my swearing-in ceremony a few months ago, I believe judging is 1 part humility and 1 part courage. Humility is not simply the absence of conceit or condescension, although that is a good start. For a judge, it is affirmatively seeking to learn from others, whether it's the attorneys in a particular case or your colleagues on a multi-member court. It's recognizing that your initial view of a case may not be right, and being willing to rethink early assessments based on a party's argument, a colleague's question, or an on-point case. Humility means accepting that in our constitutional system, the authority to decide difficult policy questions rests with our elected officials, not with judges. It means acknowledging the role of a judge is not to make the law, but to faithfully apply and interpret the laws enacted by the legislature and the text of our federal and state constitutions. But it also means recognizing the power entrusted in judges and the ways in which our decisions impact the lives of real people every day. It means remembering that every case is important because every human being is important. I said that judging is equal parts humility and courage. Courage is also a lesson from the Joseph story, but it didn't make it into the Andrew Lloyd Webber account. In the Broadway show, no brother tries to stand up to the others to save Joseph. They're all part of the evil plot. But in the Torah, 2 brothers confront the majority to at least try to do what's right. When the brothers first see Joseph coming toward him in the field, they plot to kill him. But Reuben, the oldest brother, convinces the others to throw Joseph into a pit instead. As the Torah explains, Reuben is planning on circling back to the pit, rescuing Joseph, and returning him to his father after the brothers' rage has subsided. The first part of Reuben's plan works. The brothers throw Joseph in a pit instead of murdering him. But then a caravan of Ishmaelite traders passes by. This time it's Judah who stands up to try to save Joseph. The Torah notes that the pit that Joseph was thrown into was empty. There was no water in it. He would thus not have survived in it for long. So Judah, not knowing of Reuben's plan to rescue Joseph, asks his brothers, "What do we gain by killing our brother and covering up his blood? Come, let us sell him to the Ishmaelites, but let us not do away with him ourselves. After all, he is our brother, our own flesh." The brothers agree, taking Joseph out of the pit and selling him to the Ishmaelites, who take him down to Egypt. I have 6 of the most wonderful colleagues on earth. They have absolutely nothing in common with Joseph's brothers. But judging still takes courage to stand up for what is right. Courage to decide each case fairly, without fear or favor, without passion or prejudice, without sway from politics or public opinion. Courage to deliver equal justice under the law, to the poor and the rich, the powerful and the marginalized. Courage to enforce the words of our state and federal constitutions and to protect the individual rights they guarantee, even if they're unpopular. Courage to decide each case as the facts and the law require, even in the face of opposition or condemnation. And courage to dissent if at the end of the day one sees things differently from the majority. That leads me to one lesson for lawyering, mutual responsibility, and one lesson for life, forgiveness. Joseph's brothers demonstrate mutual responsibility the hard way. After Joseph is taken to Egypt, he eventually ends up in jail, where he interprets the dreams of Pharaoh's butler and baker. Years later, when Pharaoh is plagued by dreams, the butler recommends Joseph. Joseph is brought to Pharaoh and explains that his dreams of gaunt cows eating sturdy cows and thin ears of corn eating solid ears of corn means that Egypt will experience 7 years of abundance, followed by 7 years of famine. Pharaoh appoints Joseph as his economic planner to ration enough food through the 7 years of plenty to carry Egypt through the 7 years of scarcity. But the famine doesn't only hit Egypt. According to the Torah, it sweeps the entire world. So Joseph's brothers, hearing about the surplus in Egypt, head there to buy food. Joseph recognizes them immediately. With that many brothers, I imagine they would be pretty hard to miss. But the brothers do not recognize Joseph. So Joseph comes up with an elaborate ruse to figure out if his brothers are still each man for himself, or if they have learned to take responsibility for each other. The last part of the plan involves having one of his servants hide a silver goblet in the bag of Benjamin, the youngest brother, who had become Jacob's favorite after Jacob believed Joseph to be dead. Once the cup is found, Joseph demands that Benjamin remain his slave while the other brothers can return to Jacob. But this time, the brothers refuse to abandon one of their own. As Andrew Lloyd Webber tells it, "Each of the brothers fell to his knees. Show him some mercy, O mighty one, please. He would not do this, he must have been framed. Jealous and beat us, we should be blamed." The Torah version is similar. In it, Judah says that he promised his father that he would be Benjamin's guarantor, so he must remain as a slave in Benjamin's place. The Hebrew word for guarantor, arav, is the same root used in the Gemara, a central Jewish legal text, to explain that Kol Yisrael arevim ze bazeh. All Jews are responsible for each other. Communal responsibility is not only an important part of Judaism, it's an important part of lawyering and our legal system as a whole. It's important to many of the lawyers in this room. For so many in our profession, pro bono work is an integral part of their practice. Whether it's aiding a new business in setting up articles of incorporation, helping a refugee fill out an asylum application, or arguing on behalf of a community-based organization or low-income client in court. Pro bono work is not only a way to give back to our communities, it's an acknowledgement that not everyone in our state can afford legal services, and as attorneys, we have a responsibility to ensure that equal justice is accessible to all. But even beyond pro bono work, mutual responsibility is inherent in a lawyer's dual role, acting not only as a representative of a client, but as an officer of the court and the legal system. When a lawyer furthers the public's understanding of and confidence in our judicial system, our democracy is strengthened and the rule of law is preserved. And finally, forgiveness. Joseph is perhaps the classic story of forgiveness and reconciliation. Joseph forgives his brothers for selling him into slavery. The brothers forgive Joseph for his childhood conceit, and perhaps more importantly, Joseph and his brothers each forgive themselves for all the times they fell short. In the Torah, it explains that Joseph's sobs were so loud that the news of the brothers' forgiveness and reconciliation immediately reached Pharaoh's palace. The Jewish community, as the Attorney General mentioned, is currently in the period between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, the 10 days of repentance or the 10 days of return. We're taught to ask forgiveness not only from God for when we miss the mark, but from our fellow humans, from family members, colleagues, and friends, for anything we did to harm or hurt them over the past year. Asking for forgiveness from God and from human beings requires all three of the traits we learn from Joseph. It requires humility to admit that we are not without fault. It requires courage to share our weakness with others and to ask for their forgiveness. And it requires an acknowledgement that we are responsible for others beyond ourselves. During this season of repentance and return, let us all use humility, courage, and mutual responsibility to ask for forgiveness from others and to forgive those around us. But let us also use those same traits to help us learn to forgive ourselves. Sometimes, despite our best intentions, we fall short. Learning to forgive ourselves and move forward may be Joseph's most important lesson. Thank you, and Shana Tova.